Here are 9 woodworking tools I regret not buying sooner. This video is sponsored by Ethos Life. So none of the tools in this list are tools I bought when I was a new woodworker, and in a lot of cases that's because I didn't know they existed or they just didn't exist yet. But over the years as I discovered them, I really wish I'd known about them sooner because I would have spent my money differently, and I'd like to help you avoid that same regret. One of the biggest problems that new woodworkers face is not having the room in their shop or in their budget to buy the larger tools that they'd like to have, and that includes a drill press. If you're not familiar with a drill press, one of the primary advantages to having one is to be able to repeatably and accurately cut holes in your workpiece, whether that's straight up and down 90 or at a very specific angle that's hard to achieve using a hand drill. And that is where a portable drill guide is a fantastic substitute and item number 1 in my list. You could just drop this guide right onto your work and guarantee a perfectly 90-degree hole. There are several versions of a portable drill guide that are available online, but a lot of them are pretty cheaply made and pretty lightweight, mostly made of plastic parts. This one, made by a company called UJK, is a really well-made tool. It has a cast aluminum body, and it's also got these steel guide rods, and the fit and finish of this thing are absolutely amazing, and it's very hefty and substantial when you hold it. I mean, you can tell it's a well-made tool. This can use all the same bits that a hand drill or drill press can use, up to, I think, 2 1/4 inches, which I don't even know if I have a bit that's that large. All right, down here on the bottom, you've got a non-slip rubber pad to keep it from moving around, but my advice, especially when using larger drill bits like Forstner bits, is to go ahead and clamp this thing down to your workpiece, and that's just going to make it a lot easier to use. It's kind of hard to coordinate drilling the hole with one hand, especially a larger hole, and then holding this thing down to your workpiece to make an accurate cut with the other hand. You do have these slotted holes as well as threaded holes, so if you need to bolt this down or screw it down to your workpiece in order to make the cut, if that's acceptable for your application, you can do that. And you also have these V-groove cradles, so if you need to cut a hole in a piece of round stock like a dowel, you have that option as well. And now you can guarantee that you're making perfect 90-degree cuts in your workpiece, but you can also cut up to 60 degrees in either direction by unlocking the handle and moving the guide using the scale on the side. This is definitely a case, though, where you're going to want to have this clamped down because it does get a little bit tippy. Using a portable guide to cut angled holes, I think, is so much easier than using a drill press. If you've ever tried to do that on a drill press, you know what a pain it is to get set up and also get it set back to 90 again. And each guide rod has a depth stop on it, so you can set the depth from either side or set 2 different depths for a complex operation. And I also like it because you can use the depth stop to hold up the carriage when you go and change your bits. And finally, it comes with 2 onboard centering pins that are held inside the carriage and can be attached to the bottom so that you can use the drill guide on the edge of a board and get a perfectly centered hole. If I were to go back and start all over again from scratch, I would definitely invest in one of these first. I think it's more useful for the money, and then later go back and buy the drill press after I've purchased a lot of the other larger tools that I'd like to have in my shop. All right, who'd like to pay less money for a better product? When people think about pocket hole jigs, it's safe to say that what comes to mind most often is the Craig jig. I've had mine for about 10 years, but in that time, other brands have come out with jigs on the market like this one from Enjoy Wood, which I think is a better product and is also cheaper. So why do I think that? Well, let's start with the obvious up front. This jig is made almost entirely of aluminum and steel, where the Craig jig is made mostly of plastic. These two cut the exact same hole patterns and have the same capacities, but this one has a much smaller form factor compared to the Craig jig, again, because it's made of all metal. This one has a much better fit and finish and feels a lot more durable than the Craig jig does. Both operate pretty much the same. You still set the depth of cut on the side of the jig. Then you can set the depth of the clamp, and I like this jig a lot better because it's got these handy markings in both millimeter and standard measurements so that you can make sure that the clamp is set to the right distance based on the thickness of your workpiece. For the drill bit, you can set the depth of cut on the base of the jig using this scale here, but I also like that you can use this separate and I think easier to use depth gauge tool. Another thing I love about this jig is it comes with this low profile dust collection port, and the very best thing about it is that it fits exactly the Festool vac hoses, which is a very convenient thing for my shop setup. This part of the jig is removable. All you've got to do is take out the thumb screw, and now you can add it to this portable guide that the set comes with. And if you've got a larger workpiece that you need to add pocket holes to, you've got a portable guide that you can do that with. The last thing that this jig comes with is this set of guide rods that screw into the body of the jig, and they are segmented so you can screw them together and make larger lengths if you need to. And you can attach things like these stop blocks to it to make consistent cuts, but I don't use this feature. Nope, instead I built this. So what do you call it when you build a jig for your jig? What I'd call it is a simple MDF platform that I've packed with features. I added onboard storage for the drill bit, stop collar, and Allen wrench, and then I also added that depth gauge tool for convenience. And there are magnets embedded in the back so that all these small parts stay in place. There's T-track on both sides, that way I could use a stop lock, and I also put these tick marks every 2 inches for consistent hole spacing. And because the base of the jig is only a 1/2 inch thick, I can embed it into the MDF, which you can't do with the Kreg jig because it's 1 inch thick. But the real reason that I made this jig is not because I need another jig, but because of the tool that I just discovered, which is going to help me connect this thing to all my work surfaces. And I'll show you what that is in a minute, but first I need to tell you about the little tool that's going to unlock all of these new possibilities in my shop. Oh man, so excited. This may be my favorite tool on this entire list. This tool is so simple, so amazing. It does more than one job at once, which is always something I love in tools. But more importantly, it unlocked a whole new way for me to use jigs and fixtures in my shop. This tool is designed to work with any 20mm dog hole system like this MFT top, or if you have a Ron Paulk bench or my outfeed assembly table, it'll work on all of those. And it chucks into your drill just like this. So because I do silly things like assemblies on my MFT top, I inevitably will get glue or something like that down inside the dog holes. And once that's dry, you're never going to be able to get a bench dog back down in there again. But I can use this tool just like this, and I can spin this with the drill and do it fairly quickly. And this is going to drop into the hole, clean all of that out, and then it's going to drop down and add a little chamfer to the top of the hole. And so now this dog hole has been completely reset back to brand new again, and you can slide your bench dogs right in there, good as new. And so what about that chamfer? Why do you want that there? So the first thing it does is it breaks that edge and it makes it so that it's not sharp anymore, and when you're moving stuff around on the MFT top, it won't get snagged and caught on that and cause chipping around the outside of the dog holes. But the other thing, and I think the much, much bigger thing that it does, is it allows for the use of what are called chamfer dogs. So if you see this bench dog, it's got this tiny ring around it, and that's going to fit this chamfer exactly. And now that bench dog, instead of overhanging like a traditional bench dog does, it's perfectly flush with the edge of this hole. And so now you've got a nice even reference surface that's in line with the dog hole itself with no offsets. But the other thing that these chamfers open up for you, and this is what I was super excited to tell you about earlier, is that you can use these power lock chamfer dogs. So they've got the same beveled edge on the top, and they will go into these chamfered holes and sit completely flush. So this is the pocket hole jig that I showed you earlier, and you'll notice that it's got these strategically placed 20mm dog holes all over it, and they're all spaced 96mm on center, just like the MFT top and just like my assembly table, and that is for a reason, because I want to be able to use these power lock dogs to fasten this down to the bench. And so how that's going to work, they're going to slide in here and go through here and through the MFT and sit flush with the top. And the way they're going to work is they've got this eccentric nut on top, and when that is turned, this is going to turn out and cinch up, which is going to fasten this to the MFT top. So I'll just pick another, we'll put it here, I guess. It doesn't really matter because it would fit no matter where I put it because everything lines up. And so now I can just use an Allen wrench and tighten these into place. And now this thing is absolutely fixed and secured, and I can use this without worrying about it sliding around. So I don't know about you, but it certainly makes me excited and has my mind spinning thinking about all of the different jigs and accessories that I can look at building that will fasten directly to my work surfaces securely, but also have the fasteners be out of the way. And it's all thanks to this little tool and the little chamfer that it makes and the discovery of these power lock dogs. The tools in this video are designed to make your time in the shop easier to help you get prepared for your next project. Ethos does the same thing, but for something much more important. Being a husband and father, it was important to me to be prepared for what would happen if I wasn't here anymore. Look, life insurance isn't something that people like to address. I get it. But you wouldn't dive into a furniture build without a plan, would you? Knowing your options and having a plan for the worst case scenario is just the smart thing to do. Figuring out life insurance can be confusing and time consuming, but Ethos focuses on a seamless customer experience with a 100% online application process. There's no medical exam, just answer a few health questions, and in most cases, you can have a plan in place the same day. Life insurance shouldn't cost more than it has to, but according to Investopedia, each year that you wait to purchase life insurance, your premiums can increase in cost by 8 to 10%. So, if you're ready to learn more about Ethos and get a free life insurance quote, click the link below and get your plan in place. All right, back to the list. The next item I want to show you is on the list because it's so dead simple to use and also so useful in the shop, but it's one that I think that most new woodworkers don't necessarily hear about right away. And what I'm talking about are universal fence clamps. And so these really don't look like traditional clamps, but the way they work is they've got a clamping knob on one side, and on the other side, they've got this hook. And I think this is 3/8 of an inch. I can't really remember. But what this allows you to do is attach any number of jigs or accessories to your table saw fence. All you've got to do is drill a couple of holes in the top of the jig, and you can use these clamps. If you've ever used a dado stack in your table saw to cut rabbets, then you know that you can use a sacrificial fence to bury the blade in, and that way you can adjust the width of the rabbet you're cutting. So with these clamps, you can slide them in here and clamp them down to the fence like this. So way back in my old shop, I dropped a router table in the side of my table saw fence, and I always wanted to create a fence system that allowed me to make the best use out of that router. This is the solution that I came up with, and the best part about the whole thing is that it connects right to my table saw fence using 2 of those universal fence clamps. What that allows is infinite adjustability of the router fence just by moving the table saw fence. And when this is locked down, this guy is rock solid. It's not going anywhere. And these can be used on other tools as well. I've used it on my bandsaw, and I've also used it on my miter saw to make a stop block. So that's it. It's a really simple little tool, but it's sneaky useful. It's one of those things that you're like, how did I not know that existed? They typically get sold in pairs, so you get 2 when you purchase them, and I think I've got like 3 pairs of these around the shop. And the next item on the list is another one of those just dead simple tools that I think everyone should have in their shop because it's got a couple really good uses, and that is an aluminum straight edge. And this is not one of the ones that is super rigid or made out of steel. It is flexible, and I'll show you why that's important in just a minute. This 3-foot one costs about $10, so it's really super cheap, and you can get them in 4, 5, 6-foot lengths, whatever suits your need. So the obvious use for this is as a straight edge, and one really good application for that is if you don't yet own a track saw, but maybe you have a circular saw or a jigsaw, you can use a straight edge to provide a nice guide to create straight cuts in your workpieces. I recently tested out a DeWalt circular saw in another video, and this came in really super handy for making some cuts in a sheet of plywood that were extremely straight, clean cuts. But there's one more great use for this that really relies on that flexibility. So recently I made a desk, and I wanted to create a template because the desk and monitor stand are going to have this big sweeping curve cut in the front. And what I discovered is that I could clamp this straight edge vertically to my bench and then line it up to my reference marks. I could move it into place and create perfect even curves, and it stayed put. That was great because it freed up my hands to then use a pencil to mark that curve so that I could go and cut it out. And I think just that one trick alone is worth the $10 to have one of these flexible straight edges in your shop. The next item on my list has come in really handy over the last few projects that I've done. I've installed a lot of cabinets and floating shelves around my house, and one of the most important things that you have to do in that process is be able to locate the studs in your walls. There are a lot of electronic gadgets that you can use to scan for and detect studs. Most will light up when they think they've found a stud in the wall. But my favorite way to do this is more of a manual way and relies on a little bit of magic. This is called a stud buddy. Essentially, it's like a torpedo level with a few magnets embedded in the back of it, and you run those magnets along your walls, and they catch every time they hit the head of a drywall screw or a nail, and then you can level them like this, and you know exactly where the stud is running in the wall. And wherever those screws are located is almost always going to be where the stud is. One easy way to verify this is that you can locate 2 screws in different studs and then measure the distance between them. In the United States, where I live, the distance between those should most likely be 16 inches or 24 inches. And so I find using magnets to locate studs in the wall is a little bit more reliable over time than using the electronic ones. You don't have to worry about dead batteries or weak batteries. When the electronic ones get weak batteries, they can often act erratically and start beeping and lighting up when they're not supposed to. And those are also prone to giving you false positives because they can locate things like pipes and other objects inside the wall, think that's a stud, and man, you do not want to find out the hard way that the thing that you hit with a screw is not a stud, because that can end up being a really expensive repair for you. So the stud buddy's pretty small. It's going to fit easily inside of your toolbox or your tool bag, and it's going to be 1/2 to 1/3 of the cost of an electronic stud finder. So one of the things I've spent a lot of time and energy on since moving into this shop is organization. And I did a whole video outlining my organization strategy, which I'll leave a link to down in the description below if you'd like to check that out. But one of the problems that I talked about in that video that I discovered was actually costing me a good amount of money over time is that I had absolutely no control over fasteners and small parts. I had a drawer or two just crammed full of random stuff all thrown together, and I never really knew what I had in there, and inevitably what this led to was a trip to the store to buy whatever fasteners I needed for my next project. So when I designed the charging station that you see on the wall behind me, I wanted to allocate some space there for organization bins. That way I could keep all my most commonly used fasteners in one place and at my fingertips, but more importantly, highly visible, so I could always tell how many of each one I had on hand. This small part organizer system was the best option that I could find for a couple of different reasons. Number one is the size of each one of these trays is really large, and you can see it holds an awful lot of fasteners, especially compared to my old bin system that I was using before. And also they're clear, so I can see exactly how much I have left inside here before I know that I need to go purchase more of that particular type of fastener. And they also come with their own labeling system, which would go up here. But honestly, in my case, because I'm storing these up high on a shelf, I found a much better option is to just print off a label and stick it here on the front, which makes it a lot more visible to me as I'm working. And these are stackable. They've got a rib system on top, so if you buy multiple units like I did, you can stack them on top of one another and they won't shift around or fall over. So you can see here in my system how I've got it set up. I've got construction screws, cabinet screws, pocket screws. I've even got some dominoes in here. And the nice thing is I can just pull out what I want, take it to my project, use what I need, and then return it when I'm done. Pretty easy. Up next on the list is one of my favorite new tools that I've discovered, and this one is another multitasker, and so right away it gets points for me just for that fact alone. This is a multifunction scribing tool, and this one is made by Saker. So to use any scribing tool, all you need to do is to run some type of reference pointer along the surface that you're trying to match, and then scribe that line onto your workpiece. Then you can cut that edge and guarantee that it fits into that exact spot. What I really like about this scribing tool is that it uses a deep hole pencil, which it comes with, but you can also use the Pica pencils, which I think makes it super handy. This part that holds the pencil also pivots out. And that way it allows me to use this like a compass, and I can draw arcs or circles. And this tool also comes with an onboard trammel point. And that goes into this small hole, and then in this configuration, you have a trammel that can draw circles up to like 17 or 18 inches in diameter. And you can also flip this around and insert the pencil in it like this, and now you have this reference edge that allows you to mark out joinery on the edge of your workpiece with consistency. And that is a lot of features packed into one little tool. Again, I absolutely love multitaskers, and this one folds up nice and compact, so it's easy to throw into a tote bag or your toolbox and doesn't take up much room. It is just such a neat little tool. So one tool purchase that you might assume is just really easy, you could go and make it and move on with your life, is buying a mallet. Everybody needs a good mallet for their shop, but what I found out at least is that it was a little bit of a process to figure out what type of mallet was going to be the most useful for the type of work that I do and that I would reach for the most often. Now, I build a lot of cabinets and furniture, and I use dowel and domino construction, which means during assembly I need to be able to knock parts together. This joiner's mallet's just too big. It's just got this huge face, and this is made out of solid white oak, very hard. If you use this on a project, you're probably going to end up denting your work. Save this type of thing for heavy mortising with a chisel. Same thing with a hammer. This steel head is just going to absolutely tear up any type of plywood or hardwood that you try to hit with it. And carving mallets are really made for fine chiseling work, where you're going to get up on the head of the mallet and take small, light taps. Not really meant for assembly. But this mallet has the weight and small size of a hammer, but it comes with non-marring plastic heads. Well, this side is a little bit harder plastic, and this one is made of rubber. Now, this will get into nice tight spaces, and I've used it on plywood and hardwood alike with really good results. It's got just enough weight to get nice forceful blows when you're assembling something, but it's not going to tear up your work. All right, so there you go. I know that it seems a little silly to put that much thought into a mallet, but over the course of years and a number of projects, I find that this is my go-to mallet for all of my assembly tasks. There you go, 9 tools I wish I had bought sooner. If you'd like to see other tools that I love to use in my shop, I've got a couple videos lined up for you here, and until next time, have fun in the shop.